Now, in this problem, we will be taking an equation and solving for x. Now, if you just glance at this equation, you can see that it might be pretty difficult to sort of guess the values that would make this true. What would I put in for x here and here to make this come out to be 0? Well, one thing we can do is we can break this equation into two factors so that we can more easily find the answer. Now, let's see how we do that. How do we factor this equation? Well, we'll rewrite the equation, and this will be the front term, and the middle term, and the back term. Now, we're going to split this equation into two factors. So the very first thing we'll do is we'll put in two sets of parentheses and set them equal to 0. And we see over here on the edge, that's step 1. We'll fill in both front terms. All right, so what times what will give us this x squared? Well, clearly, these two front terms have to be x times x to give us x squared. That was pretty easy. Step 2. We're going to do the same type of things to the back terms. What will the back terms be? Well, we know that the back term times this back term will give us this back term, will give us this -10. So we say, what times what do we need to put in here to have them multiply to be 10? Well, we'll just find the factors of 10. We're going to have some choices. Now we'll start with 1. We'll always start with 1. So 1 and 10. And those will be those are factors of 10 multiplied, and we'll get 10. 2 and 5. There are some more factors of 10, 2 and 5. The next ones would be 5 and 2, but do you notice this is a repeat? This is a repeater of 2 and 5, actually. So once you find a repeater, as you go sequentially up, you can stop. You found all the factors. So our factors of 10 are 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. So we said to ourselves, now we're going to go to step 3. We rewrote our factors. And we said, well, which of these sets of factors will let us make our middle term of 9? Okay, which of these factors could we use to create a 9? Well, I don't think we're going to be able to use 2 and 5, but 1 and 10. We say, yes, if we're allowed to sort of manipulate the signs, the positives and negatives here, we can make a 9. Of course, we're actually trying to make a -9. So we've determined we're going to use 1 and 10 as our back terms. Well, let's see what happens now. Step 4. Let's look. So we have x squared minus 9x minus 10 equals 0. We have x and x as our front terms. We have 1 and 10 as our back terms. And now here in step 4, S4, we have to determine the signs for the back terms. Is this a positive 10, a negative 10, positive 1, negative 1? Well, let's look. It has to be either -1 times positive 10 to give us a -10. Remember, we're going to multiply and get a -10. Or we have to use positive 1 and -10 multiplied to get a negative 10. So it's got to be one of these. But notice, our middle term is a negative 9. So to get a negative 9, we clearly have to use the positive 1 and the negative 10. And so we'll fit those in. X plus 1, see the arrow coming down, x plus 1 times x minus 10 equals 0. Okay? And now that we've done that, step 5, we'll split these factors apart and solve. Slide this so you can see this. So we split off x plus 1 equals 0. We solve for x and we see, oh, x is negative 1. Pretty straightforward. And we split off x minus 10 equals 0. We solve for x and we see x is 10. So we actually have two answers, we think. Unless we made a mistake, we have two answers. X equals negative 1 and x equals 10 are both correct answers. We think, but we will check our answers. Let's see how we check our answers. Final step, step 6. We're going to check your answers. So let's see. Over here we'll do a check for x equals negative 1. We'll rewrite the equation, x squared minus 9x minus 10 equals 0. And everywhere we see x, we'll substitute in the negative 1. So we have negative 1 squared minus 9 times negative 1, putting in negative 1 for x in both places, minus 10 equals 0. Well, let's see. Negative 1 squared is negative 1 times negative 1. Well, that's a positive 1. So that's positive 1. Negative 9 times negative 1, well, that's positive 9. And we're just bringing down the negative 10, no change there, equals 0. Well, 1 plus 9 is 10. 10 minus 10 is 0. And this is a true statement. 0 does equal 0. So our answer of x being equal to negative 1 is correct. So far, so good. Checked our first answer. Now we'll check our second answer. X equals 10. Same process. We'll write down the equation, and then everywhere we see x, we'll substitute in the 10. So let's see. 10 squared minus 9 times 10 minus 10 equals 0, we hope. Well, let's see. 10 squared, that's 10 times 10. So that's 100. Minus 9 times 10, negative times a positive is a negative. So that's minus 90. And we have minus 10. So let's see. 100 minus 90 is 10. 10 minus 10, and look at that. 0 equals 0 again. Also true. So both of our answers, x equals negative 1 and x equals 10, are correct.